Hello, everyone. My name is Richard Lee again. I am a retired immigration officer. I wanted to talk to you today about Somalian refugees. And this is all in the media news right now, so I thought it would be appropriate to discuss this now. Um, Years ago, when I first started, about more than 20 years ago, I ran into a situation with Somali refugees who were coming into the country. And they had been granted refugee status, and you have to do background checks. Well, you do checks on them. You don't do background checks because there's no such thing as vetting someone from Somalia or any other country for the most part outside of Europe. Uh, in Japan and South Korea, perhaps. But even those, it's very difficult to vet because those countries don't share information, even criminal information, often to us. So um, it's vetting is a great word that the service uses that has absolutely no real meaning whatsoever. I digress though because I wanted to talk about the Somali refugee issue that I ran into, so I'll get back to that. Uh, so this gentleman comes in, and his name is just for simplicity. I'll use a name, and also for privacy. His name was John Smith, and so John Smith came in, and I started looking him up, and he said he was born on January 1st, 1981. January 1st, 1981, and he was born in a certain city in Somalia, and his mother's name was Sarah, and his father's name was John. Fictitious names, of course. And so then when I started looking up, I realized that there were 10 people from a same small town in Somalia that were named John Smith. And they were all born on January 1st, 1981. They're all had the same mother's name, the same father's name. Everything was identical. And all 10 of them were given refugee status. And I thought that was strange. So I brought that up to my superiors, and they said, that's common. Yeah. Oh, because they don't really know their dates of birth. They don't keep up with that stuff. So they make up days of birth. And I said, well, that's fine. But do they make up names and all of them have the same mother and father? And lo and behold, that's what's happening quite a bit. I don't know if anyone has ever done a check on that seriously, but I had 10 that I know of, and they dismissed it right off the bat, and I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. It opened up a lot of room for a lot of fraud and a lot of misrepresentation that the service just didn't care about. And so you really don't know who these people are when they come in. They could be anyone. What I will tell you is often those same people would come back 5 years later when they're applying for citizenship, if they applied for citizenship, and they would want to change their name to something else. And the service didn't want you asking about why they wanted to change their name. For the service was like, it's none of your business. I thought it was very much my business to know, and it was very much the business of the service to know. Um, and one of the common themes was that I would get is in many instances where people were changing their name, quite a few were legitimate reasons. Koreans did it a lot to change their names to make it more anglicized so their friends could know them better as Sally or Jennifer or John or whatever. But they never really hid their real Korean name. They just said they wanted to anglicize it. As a side note, their parents were always furious about that. Their parents were always furious about that and unhappy. But in this instance, the Somalis would come in, and other people would come in and just say, a lot of refugees, but the Somalis would come and say, I want to change my name now. And I would ask, even though I wasn't supposed to, why? That's an interesting name that you're changing to now. Why do you want to change your name to that? I think it's a really fascinating name. You do it as some cordial thing. Well, lo and behold, they would always say, oh, every time they would say, well, that's the name I'm known as back home. People always called me that. So now I want to go back to the name they called me, uh, kind of my nickname, but it was a totally full name. Uh, and they'd never told us about this, so we never checked anything on that name or who that person was. And then often want to change their birthdays too. And we would not, the funny thing is we perfectly allow them to change their names, but we would not allow them to change their birthday because the birthday is the identity in some context. But we would definitely allow them to change their name. And unless they came in with a really legitimate reason to change their birthday, we just didn't do that. But they could change their name because that's a legal thing they could do. But I thought that was really interesting, and I thought maybe you might find that interesting. That yeah, they come in with fake names. People come in with artificial fake names all the time and change them regularly, and no one questions it or checks on it, or it even goes back and does a background check on that name. It's extremely dangerous. It's a real national security concern to me, but the service doesn't think so, and the service is absolutely wrong. So I think that's an interesting one.